Welcome to the 6-drop card review with Dew. We're going to be doing this in the same order we always do, you know, going through the soulbound 6 drops first, then going through the ones you can craft second. So, let's dive right into it, shall we? First up, Mage. He is a 6 mana 4/7 with spell damage +1. Not a terrible card. I mean, he's okay in beginner mage decks and stuff like that because he is a source of spell damage. However, again, that's very expensive for spell damage, and his stats, while not bad at all, there are other cards that have better stats that are 6 drops. So, he's not run in professional grade decks, but for a starter mage deck or I guess like a starter... No, just a starter mage deck, he'd be okay. Maybe druid, I don't know. I'm not a real druid expert, or mage expert for that matter, but he's not a bad card, there's just better cards than him, so yeah. Next up, Boulderfist Ogre. He is a 6 mana 6/7. Hey, there's those better stats. He's just a very good, beefy creature. So, while he has no text, he has good stats for his mana cost, and if you need just a big creature out there to be a threat, he's good for that. And it's kind of like the text reads out to the side. Me have good stats for the cost. He really does. So, yeah. Most beginner decks should be running this, but again, he's not a absolutely fantastic card to make him worthy of being put into most pro-grade decks simply because, again, he has no text. And that's usually something that's pretty crucial to most of these higher level decks. So, yeah. Anyway. Next up, Lord of the Arena. He's a 6 mana 6/5 with Taunt. Yeah, his stats just suffer too much for having Taunt. It'd be better playing a Boulderfist Ogre, so this guy is basically useless. Don't use him. Not in constructed decks. So, yeah. Next, Reckless Rocketeer. 6 mana 5/2 with Charge. Those are bad attack stats for a 6 mana creature. So, on top of that, it has no text other than Charge. You're spending 6 mana to deal 5 damage. That's under the 1 mana per mana, or 1 damage per mana mark. And, yeah. Don't use this unless you're trying to make a deck that is just straight up, you know, rush the opponent down and you have absolutely no other creatures to use. And even then, I'd think twice before putting this card in that kind of deck. Rocketeer's just not that good. Don't use it. And okay, that's it for soulbound 6 cards. Next, we'll get into the craftable ones. First up, Argent Commander. He's a 6 mana 4/2 with Charge and Divine Shield. At a glance, he seems suddenly worse than the Reckless Rocketeer. He's actually a ton better because spending 6 mana to deal 4 damage may be below that 1 damage per mana mark, but since he has Divine Shield, you can use him to clear out creatures and he will survive the trade. So you will have you'll have a creature that will deal 4 damage upon summoning and then stay on the board as a 4/2. Or if you go for their face, you know, you get a creature that's got Divine Shield and is a 4/2 and has to be dealt with still. So the fact that he has Divine Shield actually makes him a very good card, even in, you know, the pro circuit, because he's so versatile. You know, you can use him for a 4 damage burst to clear out a creature or just as a board threat. So actually a very good card. Next up, Cairn Bloodhoof, a 6 mana 4/5 with a Death Rattle of Summon a 4/5 Bane Bloodhoof. Let me pull that up for you guys. There's Bane. Cairn is just an annoyingly good creature. Because he has 4 attack, you know, he will be able to trade with quite a few different cards. The 5 health, kind of like a Yeti, makes him hard to kill, too. But the worst part is, upon killing him, he just duplicates himself and summons a new one. He's basically an 8-10 equivalent for 6 mana. That's ridiculous stats. But, you know, that can be taken away by a silence or stuff like that. But regardless, Cairn is just an extremely good legendary. Yeah. He's someone that, yeah, I'd even recommend crafting him. He's just that good. But yeah. Annoying card. Very annoying card, because he's so hard to get off the board. Anyway, moving on. Frost Elemental, a 6 mana 5/5 with a battle cry of freeze a character. It's not bad, because it is, you know, decent enough, I suppose, at stalling out for a turn or something and getting a 5/5 on the board, but that being said, there's just better cards. I mean, Frost Elemental's not bad, but again, yeah, I just stated it. There's better cards than a Frost Elemental, so yeah, I suppose if you have him, and you don't have very many other cards except for the Soulbounds, he's definitely not a bad option for a 6-drop, but yeah, just I don't know. I guess the battle cry does just too little, combined with the suffering stats of -1 attack and -2 health compared to, say, a Boulderfist, where after the freeze is gone, he's just not worth it. I would actually recommend a Boulderfist over a Frost Elemental, by the way, just if anyone cares. Anyway, next up, Gelb and Mechatorque, a 6 mana 6/6 with a battle cry of summon an awesome invention. We're gonna be here a while, so guys, grab your popcorn, because it's Gelbin time. Awesome invention number 1. Note when you summon him, he says my mighty invention, so you can call him either. Anyway, first up is the Emboldener 3000. It's, as you can see, a 0/4. At the end of your turn, give a random minion +1/+1. Yes, the Emboldener can do this to opponent minions, it can do it to your own minions, it can do it to itself. So you're really taking a gamble. One thing you will notice is kind of consistent with Gelbin is that he's always a gamble, and sometimes you want certain inventions when your opponent has no creatures on the board. Sometimes you want certain inventions when your opponent has a ton of creatures, so that those inventions are less likely to hurt you, because they can. So, yeah, that's the buffer. Next up is Gelbin's Homing Chicken. It is a 0/1 at the start of your turn. This means it has to survive your opponent's turn, which is very rare indeed. Destroy this minion and draw 3 cards. Of all of the inventions, this is consistently the nicest one to get, because it means your opponent has to divert some amount of resources to deal with it, whether it's attacking with a creature or casting a spell. They've got to deal with the chicken somehow, otherwise you just got to summon a 6/6 that drew you 3 cards. That's really good value, and if that were Gelbin's text instead of just summon an awesome invention, I would play Gelbin without a question in every deck I ever made. So, you always want to get the chicken. That one. But yeah, that's the chicken. That's the only invention of Gelbin's that will not bite you in the butt ever. Next up, Repair Bot. It is a 0/3. At the end of your turn, restore 6 health to a damaged character. That's a lot of health, especially considering it can heal your opponent. It will only heal damaged characters as well, so it's not like it could randomly heal a minion who's already at full. So, unless you want to leave your opponent at full health, the only way to keep a Repair Bot from being really a bad thing is to try to keep your minions damaged as well, maybe even your opponent's minions. But Repair Bot's just absolutely crazy, because it will break games just by entering the field, because it's a 6, you know, you're healing something for 6, but you don't know what the very second it's summoned. It could be yourself, it could be your opponent, And, you know, it has the potential to break a game. Funny note, when comboed with Alchemy, this card will start just wiping the board off. It is the most stupidly funny thing in the world. It can also kill you very quickly. So be careful with that. Yeah, that's Repairbot. Next up is the Poultryizer. It is a 0/3, whose text reads, at the start of your turn, transform a random minion into a 1/1 chicken. There is the chicken. It is not an angry chicken. That is noteworthy. It does not get buffed when it gets hurt, unfortunately. Anyway, funny note, the Poultryizer can Poultryize itself. So sometimes Gelb will summon it, and the little Morpho Ray here will just turn itself into a chicken, and you've got it out of the way. Sometimes it turns Gelb into a chicken, and that's absolutely worst case scenario, because, yeah, you just summoned a Morpho Ray and a chicken for 6 mana. Don't you look foolish? But, yeah. You can see with all of these inventions, though, a pretty consistent thing is RNG, determining how useful they'll be, and whether or not they could actually make your opponent win the game. So because of this, Gelb is just a straight-up RNG card, and luck of the draw will determine whether or not he wins the game for you or your opponent. Because of that, he's not played very often. Not to say he has bad stats for a 6/6, or for a 6-mana card, but in fact he has good stats for that mana cost, but the inventions are so RNG based that most people don't want to run him. They just don't want to risk that kind of thing where RNG could screw games over for them. It's hard enough beating certain decks as is. So, there is a Priest deck out there that Amaz made a while ago, though, that is just completely RNG based to be funny. It's got cards like Ragnaros, Gelb, Demolisher, you know, all these cards that just throw things around and will have the game be won or lost based on RNG. Really funny deck to play against and play with. So, just a fun side note. That's Gelb. I wouldn't recommend crafting him because, again, you know, where are you really going to find a place to use him? But he is a funny card sometimes, so I don't know, maybe for the troll value. Anyway, next up is Hager. He is a 6-mana 4/4. Huh? Seems pretty bad for a legendary, right? Well, his text reads, at the end of your turn, summon a 2/2 Null with Taunt. There's your Null. So, this means that Hager, if he's not dealt with, will just absolutely become a nuisance, because every single turn he's summoning a new 2/2 with Taunt. That being said, as a 4/4, he's not terribly hard to kill, so there just aren't any decks where Hager really fits, because in control decks, you know, his stats are a little too low for most decks' tastes, because which makes him easy to deal with. So he's not a big enough board threat. In rush decks, he's too late of a card to play, and in combo decks, well, the Hager's not a combo card, so yeah. He is still a good creature. I don't know. He's just not a big enough threat, you know? The Nulls can be dealt with almost every form of AoE. Explosive Trap, Holy Nova, Consecrate. All of those will deal with them. Swipe will deal with Hager itself. Eviscerate deals with Hager. Spell Damage, Fan of Knives. There's just too much that deals with everything, so Hager's by no means a bad card, but there are better legendaries out there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So, yeah. Moving on. Illidan Storm Rage. He is a 6-mana 7/5. Slightly better or worse version of Hager, depending on your personal opinion on cards. His text reads, whenever you play a card, summon a 2/1 Flame of Azzinoth. That's your 2/1 Flame. Again, he's got the same problem Hager does. I guess he works a little bit better in combo decks, but he won't help contribute towards a one-turn kill play because every single card that is summoned has Summoning Sickness. So, yeah. On top of that, the 2/1s are very easy to deal with, having only 1 health. You know, any form of AoE will deal with them. So, Wild Pyromancer, boom. Your Flames of Azeroth got burned to death. That's embarrassing. Yeah. His stats are better than Hager's, but all in all, I certainly don't like him as much as Hager. So, yeah, both of those two just don't have a situation on where they're really good cards or big threats. Yeah, where Hager summons Taunt so that it's harder for creatures to deal with him, Illidan does not, so where Hager falls to spells, Illidan will fall to creatures. So, yeah. Rather unfortunate. Oh well. That's just my opinion, though. Don't let my personal dislike of Illidan and Hager as cards influence you. Yeah. Just don't like him that much. Moving on. Priestess of Elune, a 6-mana 5/4 with a battlecry, restore 4 health to your hero. Stats suffer too much for the battlecry. It is a bad card. Don't use it ever. No excuse for it. It sucks. Next up, Stormwalker. 6-mana 4/5 with Taunt and Divine Shield. Very, very good because it's very, very hard to deal with. Just like Cairn, the Divine Shield means that you will have to be finding more ways to deal with the Sunwalker than just dealing 5 damage. You're going to have to deal at least 6. And that's, you know, best case scenario. You'll be dealing 6. In reality, you'll be dealing closer to 8 damage to this card to get it off the field. It also has Taunt, which Cairn does not, so it can kind of block creatures out and spare you a lot of health. So, yeah. Really good health buffer. So, yeah. Sunwalker's just a really good card. So, yeah. If you get it, especially in Druid decks, I would recommend using it. Next up, Sylvanas Windrunner. 6-mana 5/5 with a death rattle of take control of a random enemy minion. This makes Sylvanas really useful, because if your opponent summons a really big creature like Ragnaros or something like that, you can just kill off Sylvanas on something else and then take it. You know, granted certain situations line up. Sylvanas is most often used in Priest decks because you can combo Sylvanas with a Shadow Word Death and then basically get a 9-mana Mind Control equivalent. Yeah. Still a 5/5 even before the Death Rattle is triggered, so you can play Sylvanas just for board control. Yeah. Your opponent basically, when you summon Sylvanas, will have to try to destroy as many creatures as possible when killing Sylvanas in a sort of, like, counterintuitive play, because if you don't destroy as many of your minions as possible, you'll run the risk of Sylvanas stealing something good. So, Sylvanas is pretty much always going to be a really high-value card when you play it. So, yeah, Sylvanas is good. Sylvanas is good. Next up, the Beast. He is a 6-mana 9/7. Holy crap, those stats. That being said, his Death Rattle is summon a 3/3 Finkel Einhorn for your opponent. This actually means he's closer to a 6/4. However, you know, that's only if he's dealt with after dealing 1 damage and attack. So, or not 1 damage, after attacking once. So, the Beast is really powerful, but you've got to be careful playing him because most decks will have a way to deal with cards like that. Especially against priests who have Shadow Word Death, or paladins who have Humility or Aldor Peacekeeper. This card really starts to suffer against those guys. There's also Polymorph and Hex for mages and shamans, and Siphon Soul for Warlocks. Rogues will just sap it all the time. Hunters will try to clear out the rest of your board and deadly shot it, or do Hunter's Mark plus some other creature. Druids will just have a problem dealing with the beast, but, you know, every other class has a pretty effective way to deal with cards like this. So if you're going to run the beast, because he does have a lot of potential, be careful playing him. Yeah, because he gives your opponent a 3/3 when he dies, and you don't want to give someone just an advantage like that for free or anything like that. So, that being said, there's Finkel Einhorn. Yeah. He has a 2 mana cost, because if he gets returned to someone's hand, he'll just cost 2 mana to play again. Yeah. It's also noteworthy that the beast is a beast itself, so useful in hunter decks. I don't know. Most hunter decks these days don't use this kind of stuff. They'd rather run a Savannah Highmane, just because it summons creatures for you when it dies instead of for your opponent. But yeah, the beast is still a good card. Just be careful using it. Next up, the Black Knight. A 6 mana 4/5 legendary. Most of the cards we've been reviewing have been legendary. I'm sorry I haven't been noting it, but I don't know. It's probably not the biggest deal in the world to note it carefully. So that being said, the Black Knight's battle cry is destroy an enemy minion with taunt. This makes him extremely good against cards like Sunwalker. And useful against druids who tend to run really powerful creatures with taunt. So, the Black Knight's really high value against those kind of decks, and it's also, ironically, very useful in druid decks, because druids have ways to give minions taunt, so, yeah. Well, I don't know. He's a good card. Really useful in counter control decks. I'll just leave it there. And last, and possibly least, is Windfury Harpy, a 6 mana 4/5 with Windfury. That being said, it's going to get dealt with. And if you're going to be using it to clear out creatures, by the time it's turn 6, most other creatures will kill this thing after 1 attack. You won't get 2 attacks in. So it might as well be a 6 mana 4/5 without Windfury. Yeah, it's basically a creature that cannot be used to clear the board. Not worth it. Don't use it. It sucks. So that's it for the 6-drop card review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did not, then send me some hate mail. I'll be sure not to read it. Yeah.